Quick World War III update for you today. Vladimir Putin, for the first time in a long time, seen in military fatigue, signifying that he is in full-blown war mode. All of this, of course, just days after Moscow was hit with one of the largest drone attacks since the war began. That was concurrent, of course, with a purported breakthrough with Ukraine and the United States, which, of course, seen the recommencement of military aid and the suspension on retrenchment of funding for Ukraine. So we are about to see this thing get out of control. Allegedly, Vladimir Putin has rejected the ceasefire plan, at least in its current form. According to the Washington Post, Russia has rejected Trump's 100-day peace plan as impossible to realize and insists no resolution is possible before 2026. They aim at dismantling Ukraine's government, according to a Kremlin-linked document. Their demands are a recognition of Russian sovereignty over occupied territories and a buffer zone in northeast Ukraine. I suspect that we're going to see a lot of attempts to forestall the inevitable showdown between Trump and Putin. However, there are things happening behind the scenes that do not match this kabuki theater that is currently on display. Case in point, there was an event that happened just a couple days ago that many of you are probably already aware of, but it's worth a second look. You see, this is what happened when a cargo ship that was being commandeered by a Russian captain, allegedly with a partial Russian crew, basically took a beeline right into a jet fuel ship that was owned by the United States. Now, was this a military ship? The jury is still out as to whether or not this was for U.S. fighter jets or aircraft. But nonetheless, this looks like a deliberate attack. The question really is, if this was a cyber attack, who was really in control at the time? And who was the one who did the cyber attack? Was this attempt at a false flag? As you can see, that was a direct hit. Bam! That sucker hit dead on, okay? And we can see here from the graphic, let's just see if we have it. So that was the actual impact point. So this was a direct hit. So this sort of hybrid warfare is intensifying in the shadows. Right now, Sudza is currently being surrounded. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, and then we're going to get back to the alleged peace talks and whether or not Russia is going to compromise. I just want to show you this, okay? So this is French AWACS planes doing reconnaissance and surveillance escorted by Rafale fighter jets. So these are jets, of course, that could potentially be nuclear armed. And this is right outside Russia's doorstep. And of course, the United States used to fly drones throughout this area, but the United States has never flown one of their F-16s. I'm sure Ukraine or somebody who's masquerading in a Ukrainian F-16 has flown there before. Of course, they would be immediately shot down if they were detected. These jets know how to maintain their distance, of course, but this signifies that there definitely is ISR happening within that region. And if we do see another attack on the Kerch Bridge, like the Ukrainians are claiming they're going to do, then will France be held to account? So big things are happening behind the scenes. We have hybrid warfare. We have attacks on Moscow, all of which does not compare to what we are being told in the media. This notion that now there's going to be a ceasefire as we now have weapons flowing back into Ukraine. And it appears as though Vladimir Putin, who paid a visit to the Kursk region in military fatigues, is there to oversee the encirclement of Ukrainian troops that is currently ongoing. It appears as though the Sudza salient has now officially failed after a rather laudable mission by Russian troops who were able to infiltrate behind enemy lines utilizing a gas pipeline. And this was a very extensive mission. It was far more intricate than it actually sounds at first glance. I can't show you the video that details the entire process, but it involved guys walking through 15 miles of tunnel They had to use various breathing apparatuses in order to get through there. Many people died due to asphyxiation. And of course, there's toxic chemicals down there as well. So it was a very complicated, very claustrophobic situation. But I tell you, when this war is over, man, what Russia and Ukraine have lost in blood, they are going to have gained in experience. Can you imagine the next generation of officers and generals and the disparity that we are going to see between that of the East and West? They have gained an immense amount of experience. Now, this guy right here, Siersky, the Ukrainian commander of the AFU, he has basically said that there is no threat of encirclement for Ukrainian troops in Russia's Kursk Oblast, despite the fact that they are clearly being surrounded. Even Western media admits that. And this just reminds us of how much the powers that be lie at times like these. Remember, it was Vladimir Zelensky who initially told his population, don't retreat and don't try to evacuate because Russia is not going to invade. This, of course, ran counter to the United States intel at the time that was clearly pointing towards a Russian invasion. This reminds us that these types of regimes will, in fact, lie when their best interests, or their own interests, I should say, certainly not the most utilitarian thing. Maybe they could argue it, but I would argue that trapping your population in just so you can maneuver around militarily is perhaps not the best course of action, especially when it condemns people to be conscripted against their will to fight in a war they might not agree with. So we know that they lie. They lie a lot. They lied in Mariupol with the Azovstal steel plant. They lied in, what was the other one? Bakhmut, where the guys were surrounded, and now the same thing is happening in Sudza. Now the Russians, to their benefit, they at least will admit when they're going to make a tactical retreat like they did in Kherson, as well as numerous other places across the map. Are they honest all the time? No, I think the jury is still out on who blew up that dam in and around the Kherson region. But, you know, I mean, that's kind of splitting hairs at this point. I will say, though, that this is definitely a sign that when the time comes for them to send us off to war, they're going to tell us all kinds of lies. And it's just a reminder that they can't be trusted, they being our leaders, because of course our leaders are saying that this is a representative democracy that should be emulated. Thus, we can only surmise that when the time comes, we will get the same treatment. And now that we've been disarmed, as I always say, they're going to give us the guns back, but there's going to be a little bit of a catch, right? The catch is going to be that you're going to have to go and die for some rich man's war, and then of course they're going to encircle you, and they will say, don't worry, everything is fine. And then you're going to get captured and probably tortured, because those guys, I wouldn't want to be them right now, because, of course, you did a Russian invasion. Let's not forget what this is. This is an invasion of the Russian mainland, okay? Now, Putin only called them terrorists, which is surprising. He didn't call them invaders. He called them terrorists. So clearly making that distinction that he still believes that the Ukrainian government has effectively been hijacked and that this is a civil war between the Slavic peoples and is not, in fact, a full-blown war on Ukraine and still thus a special military operation. Now, the European leaders, 30 countries in fact, got together to try to brainstorm how they're going to put peacekeepers into Ukraine. Now, Russia has stated, under no uncertain terms, according to Sergei Lavrov, Russia will not accept under any circumstances the presence of NATO troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers who would defend the quote-unquote Nazi regime in the remnants of the country. Lavrov said, in very diplomatic language, this is a strong signal that any attempt by the West to deploy a contingent under any pretext, be it security guarantees, separation of parties, or protection of civilians, will be considered a direct military intervention with corresponding circumstances. Now, the plan that they're trying to hatch is that senior military leaders, as well as actual leaders, heads of state, from across Europe convened in Paris to deliberate on the establishment of what they call a reassurance force. I believe one of the generals, one of the former generals, what did he call them? A reaction force, okay? Because they have to play zone defense because they don't actually have the amount of troops to police the entire border. But as we've just heard, Russia's not going to go for this anyways. So Trump is going to have to really be wrangled by these neocons that surround him to agree to something like this. Anyways, they're saying that this is aimed at safeguarding Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire and deterring renewed Russian hostilities. This is according to Western officials who communicated the details to the Associated Press. Key discussions centered around the deployment of Western forces to critical infrastructural sites. Of course, they're going to be referring to places like nuclear power plants, and U.S. air power would remain on standby to respond to any sort of breaches and facilitate the reopening of Ukrainian airspace, which is basically the U.S. in more or less basically providing a no-fly zone, which again, I don't think Trump is going to go for, at least not openly and publicly, because of course this would be a major red line. But you are already starting to see people defecting from the Trump camp who really actually thought that he was going to make a lick of difference in this conflict. Yours truly has told you that this is a much bigger problem than Trump is ever going to be able to resolve, and it's going to end in a nuclear explosion, mark my words. Now, future proposals included the large-scale prepositioning of heavy weaponry, ensuring rapid deployment within hours and days should hostilities resume. I mean, just think about what this is. They're talking about making Ukraine a de facto NATO state, putting heavy equipment in with European troops. Russia's never going to go for that. The best that Russia may go for is some BRICS nations or some global south coalition who goes in there and acts as a peacekeeping force and can truly act as some sort of third-party peacekeeping force, and maybe you have a few European countries represented in there. Of course, this would have to be something that was overseen by the UN or some derivative. Additionally, military planners consider the possibility of immediate and direct strikes on Russian targets in response to any ceasefire negotiation. So this is getting wildly out of control, and it's happening really fast. In fact, Germany's Rheinmetall, the company that makes tanks, are getting ready to take over some Volkswagen factories. Okay, so this is full-blown war mobilization mode. Like, think about what's happening here. Volkswagen can't sell enough cars, so what are they going to do? They're going to convert the car manufacturing facilities to tank manufacturing facilities. That should tell you where we're at. Now, Steve Witkoff is heading to Moscow, allegedly in the next couple of days, to try to talk to Vladimir Putin. He, of course, is a close friend of Donald Trump. I believe he is the special envoy to the Middle East, but he's played a role in the mediation between Russian and Washington officials as of late. So we're going to see as to whether or not some sort of deal, and I really think what it comes down to is because Putin is so judicious and pragmatic, I foresee him potentially agreeing to something, not completely dismissing this idea, but clearly this is a statement that he went in military fatigues to the front line today. This is clearly a statement. Now, again, we don't know what's truly happening here, what sort of deals are being worked out, so we're just going to have to wait and see. But if you ask me, it's looking as though things are falling apart and the Russians are going to go as far as they need to, and likely this war is nowhere near over and going to continue well into 2026 if we take the Russians at their word, at least based on what the Washington Post has to say. Russia will only cease fire, according to the Wall Street Journal. Russia's preliminary response to the U.S. proposal for a ceasefire, Russia will completely cease hostilities only after a comprehensive peace agreement is reached. We will consider the American proposal for a ceasefire. Thus, this is going to be a desultory negotiation, and we're going to see a stop to hostilities only when there's a full and comprehensive agreement, which makes perfect sense. So eventually, I think this is just going to end along the river. The question is when. Of course, I'm talking about the Dnieper River. It's going to end with east versus west. That is going to be the new natural boundary that will take the place of what once was the Berlin Wall. So that's basically what's going down. In other news, let's just see here if we've covered everything. Okay, so I think gold is making a run for it once again. Yep, it's making a run for it. And I think the reason why is because, well, number one, we know the market's crashing. Okay, there's going to be little up days, but it's a downward trajectory. When you look at stock market crashes since 1950, this really puts it in perspective. These aren't things that happen immediately. Well, they can happen very rapidly, especially today. And I think once this one gains momentum and we're just really just one little black swan, one butterfly effect trigger away from it collapsing precipitously because of the increasing technological centralization of commerce and how quick it is to trade nowadays, the next market crash will be theoretically the fastest because people have all these feedback loops, right? So you can see it crashing in real time. You can get in, you can get out. And for that reason, this thing is going to come undone rather quickly, just like a modern day digital bank run can happen just like that. And banks can collapse, whereas back in the day, it at least took a day. You know, guys had to go down to the bank to get their money out. You don't have to do that anymore. And that makes a big difference, which is why we can't always use these historical reference points with any degree of confidence because times are changing. Now, nonetheless, we can see that the actual length of stock market crashes can vary from 30 days all the way up to 630 days. I would say the average is a few hundred days just by looking at this. Okay, here's the average right on the bottom. 338 days, and we're looking at 32% corrections, okay, on average. We've basically merely dipped our toes in here. I think the NASDAQ is down about 10%, maybe 13% on a bad day. So we got a long way to go, and people nowadays just don't know how to cope with loss. We need to understand that the generation of traders that's come into the market and retail investors only know bull markets. I mean, we've been in a bull market since 2008. So people do not know how to cope with that. Now, what's happening in Buenos Aires in Argentina right now is that people are rioting against austerity measures imposed by Milei, and I have a sneaking suspicion that the same thing is going to happen here in the United States and Canada. Eventually, that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to riots in the streets. Right now, it's taking the form of burning Teslas, and you know, that is the virtue signal of the day, which is just dumb. While I don't agree with Elon Musk and some of his policies and perspectives on various things, doing that is not constructive. I think that ultimately Elon Musk and the panopticon that he is very furtively building whilst masquerading as a hero. And think about how far we've come with that. That used to be a green vehicle, okay? Now it's being used as a symbol of defiance for the right. I mean, this just shows you that you never know what's going to happen, right? And it's a Trojan horse. It really is a Trojan horse, because how can you convince a redneck to give up his truck, to drive around in a car that drives itself, which is eventually going to have no steering wheel? It looks like a vagina, okay? It's very emasculating, which is why I traded in for the Model S, because I felt like I was driving around in a tampon dispenser. The Model S, at least, you know, it's got some more nuts to it. The Cybertruck is just going too far, and that one, you stand out like a sore thumb. It's a gray man issue. It's a security risk. I mean, you can make a protest if you want and support Trump and Elon by buying a Tesla, but it's a security risk, right? So you got to weigh those two things, because people are vandalizing them, and for all you know, there's going to be a protest someday, and you're going to be basically stuck there in traffic, and what car are they going to single out? Well, they're probably going to start singling out the Tesla. So in the very least, do yourself a gray man favor and get one of those stickers, or get yourself a Biden hat or something just that you can throw on in a pinch, you know, a BLM hat or something, whatever you got to do. Always keep two hats in your car. This is prepper costume disguise strategy. Even if you disagree with the other side, if you want to get out alive, doesn't matter if you're right wing, left wing, chicken wing, make sure you have some sort of costume that you can put on in a pinch. have a Kamala hat, have a MAGA hat, just in case, because you never know where you're going to find yourself. I encourage you to go check out our video that we did probably a few months ago on disguises. Put a lot of work into that one. Fortunately, did not get a lot of views because people don't want to do the work. They just want to, they want the thrill and they want the chill. You can't have the thrill and the chill, okay? So you got to put in the work. Now, Trump has not, how can I explain this? There were sanctions exemptions for Russia to sell oil to Europe and to transact using Western banking systems, I believe. And that has now expired, and Trump has not renewed that exemption. So this is just another layer of this war that is being waged behind the shadows. You have what's going on in the Black Sea with the French fighter jets. You have the Moscow drone bombing, the drones that needed Western ISR in order to be successful. You have what's happening with Putin and military fatigues in Kursk, okay? You have the hybrid warfare that's happening, and you have this. So this is a failure to extend the exemption on these sanctions, which would have allowed Russia to transact with Europe to supply it with up to 21 billion euros. And the euro's going up, so that means a lot of oil, okay? So all of that shadow fleet oil, all of that, money that basically Europe is providing Russia, that is no more. At least, they're going to find a workaround. Is it going to be gold? Is this part of the reason why gold is going up? It could very well be part of the reason why that's happening. So, and gold has kind of been, it's been trading sideways for a long time, and it's really been consolidating at this level. Like, take a look at this. So, 3 months ago, like, we hit 2,900 back on February 10th, and we were kind of getting close all the way back to really the beginning of February. And so it's basically been trading sideways, okay, despite all of the volatility that's been happening and all of the sell the fear and cover the losers with the winners type selling. We're still seeing gold consolidate at that level, which my gut is telling me, and I don't do technical analysis, but to me this is a bearish signal, or a bullish signal, I should say, because it shows that despite all of the volatility, despite all of the opportunities for people to cash out, that there still is a pretty strong floor to all of this. Despite all the down days, gold barely dipped just a little bit, just a percentage point or two, and it's right back to where it was before. Silver is also trending in the same direction. Contracts to buy U.S. homes are dropping. Pending home sales fell to a record low in January. Uh-oh, that's not good. And tariffs are now fully in play. Both Canada and the European Union announced some major retaliatory tariffs today against the United States in response to President Trump's 25% tariff on all aluminum and steel imports, which went into effect last night at 12:01. So, that's what's going on. We're in a sanctions trade war, and effectively tariffs are sanctions in a way. So it's going to be an interesting year, my friends. You know what? On the lighter side, go and check out the video that I just released with my sidekick. She works here, and she's a great cook, and she's doing all these freeze-dried recipes. So go and, I know everybody here just loves the doom and gloom to titillate their adrenal glands, but every once in a while, you got to just, kick back and chill. Even if you don't have a freeze dryer, it's an easy watch. And you might want to consider getting a freeze dryer at some point. It's a great investment because basically food is, if you can preserve it properly, it's going to be one of the most valuable commodities. And if you can preserve it for a long period of time, it's going to retain its value. And that's exactly what freeze drying does. Freeze-dried food costs in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times what that same food would cost if it's not freeze-dried, because the freeze-dried can last 30 years and beyond. Some people will say it will last even hundreds of years, really, because it's in an inert package, which is pneumatically sealed, hermetically sealed, I should say. And it is basically, if you put it in the right kind of container, if you put it in a can, like a jar, and seal it, or if you put it in a Mylar bag, it's going to last decades, if not, it's going to outlast you, put it that way. And of course, throughout that period of time, we know food inflation is going to rocket through the roof. Well, that will retain its value, if not increase in value over time. So the machine actually does pay itself over time. But there are a lot of other more cost-effective solutions, and that's what we're going to start looking at on the channel, because I understand that people are falling on hard times. And, as somebody who grew up poor, I always think poor. No matter how well I ever do in life, I'll always be a poor person with money. You know what I mean? So I know how it is to struggle. I know how it is to starve. I know how it is to go without and to want. So we're going to try to focus more on that. But I can tell you one thing, guys, is that the most important thing, the most valuable thing, okay, and I've worked in some high-stress jobs over the years, and I can tell you that when it comes down to the wire, when things get stressful, when the shit hits the fan in whatever form that might take, it makes no difference how much money a person has if they're not physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. Those people will buckle under the pressure, okay? Your money and your stuff is not going to save you. You have to take care of your body, your mind, and your amygdala, of course, which controls emotions. And there's ways to do that. And so do not despair just because you don't have a $10,000 bug out bag. Oftentimes there's a bit of overcompensation going on there. And when you're a prepper, you tend to continuously enhance, right? You continuously want to get a better this, get a better that. So don't compare yourself to somebody who is 10 years into this prepping game, because in 10 years, you'll probably be that exact same person. What I'm saying is, I used to, when I first started getting on YouTube here, I would see a guy like Nut and Fancy, and he was a big time, prepping YouTuber back in the day. And this guy just had a room full of preps. And, I'm looking at my little $150 paltry bug out bag, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm never going to be on that level, right? But he was doing that for decades, okay? So you can't compare yourself. The most important thing, far and away, is things that don't cost any money. And that's your community, the people you know, the friends and family you have, your body, your mind, and your ability to manage acute stress. All those things are like first and foremost. It's going to determine when you're in a life or death situation if you're going to die or not. Those four things. Everything above and beyond that, the fear gear, as it's commonly called, it's important. It gives you an edge, but it only gives you an edge in the same way, like, let's say you're an Olympic athlete or something, okay? And the majority of the work is staying fit, staying lean, running the drills, all that kind of stuff. But that extra little edge that gives you maybe an extra 1%, 2, 3, 4, 5% chance of survival, 90% of it is those four things when it comes down to it. And knowledge, which is, of course, intellect, the mental aspect of it, right? Your ability to problem solve. But it's just that little extra edge that all of those athletes, overtrain for. That little supplement that they might take. Not an illicit supplement, but you get what I'm saying. Those little, cross-training type things that they do to just try to bump them up. If you're like Usain Bolt and you're just 0.0, seconds away from winning and setting a new world record, the difference between, that second is maybe doing a lot of different types of cross-training. And that's what the gear is. That's what the planning is and all of this stuff. Planning is definitely, but that's a mental thing again, right? So these are things that are well within your control. So that would be the best advice I have. I'm not going on a tangent here. I figure in these daily update videos, because people don't watch the actual prepping content videos, I have to inject it into the tail end of these videos. But just please focus on those things. That's why You know, you'll know when I fell off on this channel when I let my health go to shit, okay? And I almost did last year from driving around that damn tractor too much, and I had to kick myself in the ass. And I tell you, it's challenging nowadays because it's not just metabolism. It's just, you know, when you get older, your body, it's almost like a survival thing where it wants to hold on to that fat more and more. And regardless of the fact that I don't eat from nighttime until nighttime, I basically fast for 24 hours with the exception of a protein shake in the morning. And I'm barely losing weight that fast. I mean, it's coming off, but it's coming off way slower than it used to. So seize on the opportunity. The older you get, the more important this is. I don't want you to die before shit hits the fan. I would rather you died, if you have to die after the shit hits the fan, trying not to die, okay? But hopefully you don't die at all. But so when I see you on the street, I want you to be fit. I want you to be wearing proper, LA police gear, Atlas STS pants. I'll post a link in the description. I want you to have your Benchmade knife. I'm going to inspect it when I see it. I want you to make sure you have your Streamlight wedge flashlight, okay? I want to make sure you have a multi-tool. I don't care what kind it is. Oh, jeez. Dropping, getting too excited here. We got an EDC video coming up soon. Once again, your multi-tool. And I want to make sure that you have a silver coin on you. So make sure you got all those things and you might just pass the test. And maybe, how about this for a deal? If I see you on the street and you got your EDC down packed, okay? I'm going to make you a deal right now. I'm going to give you a surprise. Put it that way, okay? So I hope I see you out there. Just don't act crazy, because then I have to act crazy, and we don't want that. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care.